Yeah.
And so they listed yesterday morning. They had two bookings by the end of the day.
By the end of the day.
Yeah. So,
Whoa.
I mean, that's the speed that kind of, and I'll be honest, I've gotten some calls from hosts that have maybe listed a little too soon because they're just eager to, because they're used to the traditional mindset of like you post it on Zillow or something and you're going to wait around for 30 days.
All right. Hey, Devin. It's great to see you again.
Hey, Katrina, how you doing?
Good. So I just saw you last month, at the end of last month, at the Co-Living Business Conference, which was awesome. So thank you again for coming. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been a month already. It feels like it was just
I
last
know.
week that we were all there, and it was a great time. Thank you,
It's
by the way, for putting that
yeah.
together.
Thank you. So let's tell the people what is PadSplit. I see it on your hat. What is PadSplit, and how can that help the people who watch my channel?
Yeah, so what PadSplit is, right? We're the nation's largest co-living marketplace. And, without getting too into the nitty-gritty of what we do, really the core business is we're helping solve the affordable housing crisis one door at a time by connecting hosts who are investors, property owners, managers, landlords, right? With
Hmm.
members. And members are tenants who are people looking for a room, right? And that's where it's a little bit different than, traditional rentals. It's co-living, which I think your audience is pretty familiar with.
Right. Okay. Now you said members. I always say residents or tenants because my people sign a lease. But even though they sign a lease and they are legally tenants, I call them residents so they know I can kick them out if they do something bad. So what is a member? Why are you calling them members?
Yeah, so and this is part of what we offer when a host lists their property on our platform, is we have like a legal structure that makes the idea of co-living a little bit more compliant in a lot of jurisdictions. What we do is we have a host sign a 12-month lease with us for the property. So host Katrina signs a lease for 12 months with PadSplit, and it's a specific LLC that they sign the lease
Mm.
with. And then we sign individual membership agreements with the individual residents, tenants, right? That makes them members of that LLC. And so by
Oh.
doing that, it makes them all related to each other through the LLC, as well as now by having a property be exclusive to PadSplit, right? So when we have a property list on our platform, everyone who's sharing those common areas like the kitchens and bathroom has to be exclusive to PadSplit. And so now it's no
Mm.
longer open to the public. So you have to be a member in order to book a room. And that kind of defeats rooming house type accusations that are, rooming houses are generally open
Wow.
to the public. So that's why we call them members. And at the end of the day, if legal's watching this, they do have, they are still tenants, and there's that aspect to
Right.
it. But same thing, by calling them members, it changes the setup and how the owner's relationship to them, as well as makes it more compliant for sure.
That is genius. I love that. So it's kind of because they're all members of this LLC. Now you get around that familial status thing with the fair housing, and so that's awesome. Okay, wow. So
Yeah,
what made?
that's
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that we started in Atlanta, right, in
Uh-huh.
2018. So when we started back then, the city of Atlanta has a rule. I think it's no more than four unrelated people can
Mm-hmm.
share a house together, and by blood, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
one of those things that is a really old archaic law that we challenged, and we said, hey, we don't think that that's correct and unconstitutional. And so
Right.
by creating this, now that corporations are people, right, and you make
Mm-hmm.
them all
Yep.
sign together as part of that membership, it's been able to let us get to 10,000 rooms in Atlanta. So it's been pretty successful for us
Wow.
so far.
So we're all brothers and sisters now under this LLC.
Exactly, exactly.
So what made you get into doing this? What's your background?
Yeah, so I've been in the real estate space for going on 13 years now.
Mm.
Originally, I started off in the space in the title insurance space. I worked in the like in office on the operational side. I've always been with startups, so as a title startup. went into title sales for a couple years, and then transitioned to a different prop tech company. And then when I saw the opportunity open up at PadSplit, I was like, what is this? And I checked it out and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, right? It seems like Airbnb in 2011 or something, right? Back before they really blew up. I don't know when Airbnb started, but that was kind of my idea. As I was like, wow, this looks interesting. And, one of the things that people ask me all the time, they say, is co-living, what do you think about co-living in the future? And I say, I don't think things are getting cheaper. So co-living,
Right.
has a lot of prospects to it for sure. But one of the most important things is, as I was kind of coming on board and learning more about the company, we talk a lot about at PadSplit, we talk a lot about the triple win, right? Where the investor wins by making more money, the renter wins by saving money, and PadSplit wins by connecting those two people and obviously collecting a fee. But it's, that triple win is very important to me, because very few times in my career have I worked for a company or done something that feels so like everybody can kind of benefit from this, versus a lot of transactions in the business world tend to be very one-sided, right? One party is, it's what do they call that? A zero-sum game, right?
Right.
One
Yeah.
party is winning more
There's
than
a
the
winner
other.
and a loser. Yep.
Yeah, and that's not always the case, but that's how it felt sometimes in my previous lives. So working with PadSplit, it's definitely gives you that feel-good feeling, because there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think one of the most fascinating things about the co-living space in general, and how like our hosts are adding affordable units in the 35 plus markets I think that we're in now, is that it's done so much faster and without public money. So, affordable housing is never going to change unless there's money to be made in it, right? Like
Right.
that's what capitalism, love or hate capitalism, that's what drives it, right? Is the profit margin and the incentive. And we found a way to kind of incentivize a way to develop more affordable housing units. And so that's what I think has been the biggest impact, and why I like it here so much.
So what is PadSplit? Is it a property management company, or do you just fill the beds? What do you do?
Yeah, so I always hate to say this, and just because sometimes people get a different idea of what we are in their head. We're more similar to like an Airbnb, I would say. We are just the marketplace, the platform that connects the owner with the renter, right? And really, what it is and the reason I say we don't like to be associated with Airbnb is that we're not short term at all, right? We're more mid to long term. Our average stay on the platform is about 8.5 months. We make the members commit to at least 31 days in the property. And that's where sometimes, there can be confusion, because there's a lot of, restrictions around short-term rentals and stuff like that. But we don't do like the physical like property like turnovers. When a room turns over, we don't come in and clean, just like Airbnb doesn't. And we don't do like maintenance or anything like that. We just handle the advertising, the screening, the booking, the payment collection. Those are kind of like some of our core services. We also have our online platform that enables like communication and stuff like that. But usually, like if somebody's looking for more of like a purely passive investment, like I always like to call it mailbox money, that's where I would have them work with like a full property management company. And usually we have like in a lot of our core markets across the country, we have like property managers that are very familiar with what PadSplit is, what co-living is, and they can charge their services accordingly, because they know they're not doing everything, right? If that makes sense.
Okay. So for all of the marketing that you do, the advertising, everything, I'm sure there's a fee for that. So is that comparable to a property management company, like 8%, 10%? What's that fee look like?
Yeah, so our base rate, like our platform fee, we call it, is 8%. So that's the
Okay.
ongoing, fee of collected rents that we charge. And so we don't charge anything up front. There's no like listing fee or setup fee or anything. It's just the platform fee is the 8%. We also do have a booking fee. The booking fee is only a one-time fee per member. So like if they move in, we take the first 10 days of rent collected for any member that we source into the property. So if any host, finds their own member, which we allow, when a host has a listing live on our platform, we're going to give them a referral link that if they post that on Craigslist, for instance, and somebody books through that link, We'll still do the screening and the payment collection, but because we didn't have to advertise, we waived the booking fee. And that booking fee is one time for that member. So if they stay for 2 years, for instance, you only ever pay the one booking fee. And that's kind of the way I like to frame it up, is like akin to like how a real estate agent would charge for a like a lease up fee, right? They charge like the first 30 days. We just charge the first 10 days.
Okay, I see. So a lot of the people who come to me for coaching on how to open and operate their group homes, especially from afar, so I teach people how to do it remotely, their big fear is not being able to fill their beds. So it sounds like PadSplit is a great way for them to get into this business, this co-living business, and then use a company like PadSplit to help fill their beds.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll be honest. When I first started with the company, I was like, "There's no way there's that many people that want to rent a room in a property." Like I
Right.
was like, I had to see it
Yep.
to believe it. And like for instance, I just actually helped a host list their property. They just went live yesterday in Carson, California, and
Oh, I used to
within
live there.
yeah, I grew up in Long Beach, so it's right down the street.
Okay, yeah.
And so they listed yesterday morning. They had 2 bookings by the end of the day.
By the end of the day,
Yeah. So,
whoa.
I mean, that's the speed that kind of, and I'll be honest, I've gotten some calls from hosts that have maybe listed a little too soon because they're just eager to, because they're used to the traditional mindset of like you post it on Zillow or something and you're going to wait around for 30 days, right? And
Right.
hope you
Yeah.
get some appointments out of it or something. And I had one host back in, I think, February, who he listed at like 6 a.m. on a Tuesday or something. And he had a booking by noon, and he goes, "Wait a minute, the room's not ready." And I said, "Well, why
Right.
did you list it if it's not ready?" And I think he thought it would take a couple of weeks to fill the rooms, and so it's one of those funny times where that's not the call I expect to get. That's an upset call. It's like, "Hey,
Right.
you filled my room too fast."
Whoa. So what kind of occupancy rates are we looking at with PadSplit? Like do you have those kind of metrics where to get to 80% occupied, it only takes us 10 days or, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and that's part of what I walk through when I talk. So like my role at PadSplit is I not only manage the Southern California market for PadSplit, which means I do stuff in person. I do events, webinars, these types of things. But I help investors onboard their properties. That's kind of my other that's what I spend probably 70% of my day doing, and I onboard them not only in Southern California but across the country, right? So I'm helping host in Atlanta, in Charlotte, in Dallas, in San Antonio, right? Wherever they have properties or wherever they're located. And that's part of what I do is our initial consult. I sit down with someone, I kind of show them what occupancy numbers are in that market, in that zip code, because we have a data tool where you can see a map of the United States and you can click into all of our markets that we're in, and you can click down to if we have listings in a zip code, it'll show you all the stats for that zip code. So it'll show you like, okay, in this zip code in Atlanta with 400 rooms in this zip code, we're at 97% occupancy, right? So it kind of gives you an
Wow.
idea, especially if you're looking to acquire something potentially. It can give you some markets to shoot for, essentially. But then there's also like if you have a property, you can kind of it'll help you like price out your property, stuff like that. So now as far as like what we're shooting for on a market level, like sometimes I tell people like, oh yeah, we're right around 85% occupancy, right? And they go, well, that's not 100%. I want to be at 100%, right? And I tell them, I say, well, as a marketplace, we want to be in a place where if we're advertising, I mean, we spend I think $1.5 million a month on advertising across our active
Whoa.
listings. And if we're going to spend all that money, it doesn't make sense if we're at 99% occupancy because we're advertising for 100 rooms across the country.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we do is we try to maintain that balance, but it doesn't mean that we're not trying to get every host that we're working with to 100% occupancy. What it means is that like if occupancy dips too low, we start pumping up the advertising dollars. If occupancy gets too high, they get after us and they're like, hey, like who do you know that can bring on rooms in these areas? Like Portland, for instance, just hit 100% occupancy. It's a newer market for us, so I think we only had like 45 rooms there. It hit 100% occupancy. So they reach out to us as market managers, host advisors to say like, hey, who's almost there in Portland because we're spending all this advertising money and there's nothing available, right? Philadelphia, Richmond, both kind of had issues like that within the last couple of weeks. And it's not a bad thing necessarily,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's just
Hmm.
that they were at like 98% occupancy, 99% occupancy. And in some of those
Mm,
markets, that means that there might only be 7 rooms available for a whole city, right? And
right.
so that's where we try to bring on more supply. So that's how we kind of balance that 85% across the network is we either add
Mhm.
supply or we spend more on marketing.
Wow. Okay. So that market research tool that you were talking about with the map, that is awesome. Do you have to have a listing on PadSplit to be able to use that tool?
No, so that's where I'm going to provide you, Katrina, with a link where you can set up your own host account for anybody who's
Okay.
watching, and
Hmm.
you have free once you set up an account, you have free access to a lot of the tools and resources that we provide. That's the same account you would use to list a property, but that's a
Hmm.
common misconception. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people will tell me they're like, "Well, I didn't set up a host account because I don't have a property yet," and I'm like, well, then
Right.
you're missing out on a bunch of tools and awesome stuff that
Right.
will help you find that property. So I usually recommend anybody I talk to set up a host account so that way they can, have access to not only our map tool, but we have a
Mhm.
projected income calculator where you can plug in any address in the
Wow.
United States. You adjust how many
Hmm.
rooms it is, you can change amenities, and it'll give you an estimated like gross revenue, right? Because we don't know your
Whoa.
expenses. But it's
Hmm.
pretty amazing. So there's definitely a lot of helpful tools on there. So I always recommend, click the link in the description and
Yeah,
get set up a
definitely.
host account for sure.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So I imagine that the type of property that would do well on PadSplit would be like a huge property with a lot of bathrooms. What kind of properties do well on PadSplit? Does it need to be like minimum 4 bedrooms with 3 bath, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say like there's not really a hard minimum there. Like if you were to look at a copy of our buy box, you'd see that it says like best case scenario, a 4 bedroom, 3 bath that you can add 3 or 4 bed, 2 to 3 to 4 bedrooms to. And that is the case, but I've seen 3 bedroom properties that just have a lot of extra square footage that can work
Mhm.
because the core concept of what a lot of investors and hosts are doing on our platform is they're taking a single family property, and they're converting like square footage that doesn't generate revenue into revenue
Mhm.
generating square footage. And the way you do that is you take like a living room or a den, bonus room, office, right? And if you either add walls and a door or do small adjustments and modifications to the property to be able to turn that into a room. So that's how you're
Mhm.
able to go from like a 4 bedroom to a 7 bedroom or something like that. So a lot of people think
Okay.
sometimes that we're like advising people to like add on square footage to the property, and that's usually not the case. Most of our hosts, they're looking for a property that they can add 2 3 even maybe 4 bedrooms to within the existing footprint of the existing property, and that's
Mhm.
where they're able to do that value add, right? Because an investor might look at that same property and say, that's never going to cash flow as a buy and hold rental because maybe the rent would be $2,000 a month, and a pad split investor goes, no, that property has a really big living room. That could be 2 bedrooms. They have a bonus room. That could be a third. I can add 4 bedrooms to
Mhm.
that, and now I can rent it out for $6,000 a month, right? So that's kind of
Wow.
the perspective that they're taking. So when it comes to like what makes a property a good fit, I usually say
Mhm.
it really depends on the layout, making sure that you have extra square footage. Now the bathrooms are a little bit more of a challenge. I usually recommend at least 3 bathrooms, especially if you're planning on getting to that higher room count type of property, because on
Mhm.
our platform, no more than 4 rooms can share a bathroom. So we have a max 4-to-1
Okay.
ratio there. So like
Mhm.
in an example of like a 4 and 2, say one of those bathrooms goes to the master bedroom,
Mhm.
that can't be shared, right? So now you have 3 rooms already sharing that other bathroom. And so you can only add one more room there. So now it's a 5 bedroom house. Yeah, you might be able to make that work. But a lot of times hosts are trying to get to 6, 7, 8, especially because if you're out of state investing and you're looking to hire a property manager or something, a lot of them look at it like I need one of those rooms to pay for the property manager, essentially.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
so taking, that's where like we recommend like 4 and 3 or 3 and 3. It's more important to have
Mhm.
a third bathroom than it is to have that fourth bedroom, I would say, because
Okay.
if you're at a 4 and 3 or 3 and 3, your max total bedrooms is potentially 9, versus
Mhm.
a 4 and 2, you're capped at 5.
Okay. So this is all private rooms, right? You're not doing any shared bedrooms.
No,
with
I mean, we do
PadSplit?
have some experiments with like a hostel type setup in LA going on right now. But that's definitely super small scale. I think we only have like one property where it's just one big room and everybody's renting a bed. But
Hmm.
really what we focus on is private rooms. And that's the other
Okay.
thing that's kind of like a misconception is some people will think that, okay, well, I can get this property to 7 bedrooms, but how am I going to add 7 or 5 extra bathrooms to get it to 7 and 7? And
Mm.
that's not most of, I'd probably say like 85% of the rooms on our platform are going to have shared bathrooms. It's,
Okay.
usually you have a master that maybe that can rent for a little bit more because it has a private bathroom. Or we
Hmm.
also do have some ground up construction projects in Houston and LA that have been built up, and in Florida, I believe as well, that are like
Mm.
16 rooms, all with ensuite bathrooms, right? So like
Whoa.
if you were gonna build something ground up, I would say try to add
Mm.
those en suites. But a lot of our hosts that are just renovating an existing property aren't going to want to go through all the work of adding a bathroom just because of the dramatic increase in expense.
Right. So what about the house rules? Do you allow, first of all, do the people, the hosts, do they set the rules, or does PadSplit set the rules, and are people allowed to have guests?
Yeah, so we have our standard house rules for PadSplit that all members agree to before, by as part of their membership.
Hmm.
There's going to be things like no pets other than service animals, quiet hours, no guests, singles only, right? Those
Oh,
are
okay.
our standard
Hmm.
rules, but we do allow for hosts to modify or add to some of those, right? Like a host can technically allow for pets if they really want to, right? A host can say you can have guests if they want to. I usually recommend against guests because it just opens a can of worms, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but
I
like
don't
so
allow guests either.
yeah, so we show you what the house rules are, the member
Mhm.
rules, and you can just Google that. That's on our website. But if a host has specific rules, I usually tell them include that in your listing, so that way the member knows what they're getting into. Especially if it's something that is very peculiar or particular to your property, right? Like, okay,
Hmm.
if you have a listing with a property with a pool in the photos, but you have no intention of having the members use that pool, I say make sure
Right.
you put that very clear. Pool is off limits, right? Or no access to pool included. So that way people don't
Hmm.
move in and think I'm getting a pool, and then come to find out
Right.
they're bait and switched, right?
Right. Okay. So what concerns me is when you're talking about changing the house and taking like an unused room, like the living room or den or something, and changing that into a room. So there's not really any common space, right? There's not really any lounge space, hangout space in these pad split properties. Is that right?
Now, I mean, these conversions are technically not required by any means,
Okay.
right? So a
Hmm.
host can bring us a 4 bedroom, they can bring us a 2 bedroom apartment and say, like, I want to put this on PadSplit, right? Like, we have some
Okay.
studios in LA on our platform. And we have
Hmm.
studios in other multifamily buildings and other properties or in other markets. What I always tell people is we're usually helping investors solve one of two problems. It's like, how do I buy a real estate asset and make it cash flow? Well, the way you do
Hmm.
that is you buy the property, add rooms to it, rent them out individually, right? Co-live it.
Hmm. Right.
Or if you have a vacancy problem, right? Like I have a multifamily property, say it's fourplex and 3 of the units, like I just cannot rent out for the life of me. They've been vacant for 6 months, and say they're all 2 bedroom, 1 baths. Like really anything below like 3 bedrooms or like 3 bedrooms or less, it probably doesn't make sense to do pad split with just because like we have our fees, you have to cover utilities. It would probably just make more sense to do a long-term rental. But
Hmm.
but if you have a vacancy problem, you're not going to make more money with pad split, but you're going to make some money. So
Right.
by turning
Yeah.
it into rent
Hmm.
by the room, now you're opening up to a much wider pool of potential renters. So I've
Hmm.
seen that before where we've had multifamily investors and they like one I know had a unit that was sitting vacant for 6 months and it's like, hey, we just got to do something to get somebody in here. And so, but I just always like to disclose like, you're not necessarily going to make more money with pad split, but you'll make something and they were happy with that. Right. And that's like, okay, well, then
Right.
that's fine.
Okay. Are you seeing more working professionals, like single working professionals, or more seniors, or more students, or another demographic?
I would say, like, there's a big misconception that people say, like, oh, it's all students, right? Like, so I do
Hmm.
presentations a lot in person in front of investor groups that have never heard of PadSplit, right? They
Right.
sometimes haven't even heard the word co living. One of my favorite things to do
Hmm.
is like, raise your hand if you've heard of co living. And I hear like one or two people raise their hand. And then I say, you've all heard of co living. It just heard it under a different name, like roommates, right? And
Right.
then everybody goes, oh,
Yep.
okay. So one of the biggest misconceptions is they'll say like immediately after my presentation they'll go, oh, I have a property right next to this university, right? Students,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I say, actually, I mean, we do get students on our platform, and like when properties are onboarded that are by colleges or universities, we tend to get a lot more of the people who work there, right?
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of student housing options available near universities. There's dorms. There's, you know, a lot of students, they get a group of their friends together. They'll go lease a place together, right? They don't necessarily want to live with strangers, but we do get some of them. But our average age on the platform is 44 years old. And
Oh, okay.
I think it slightly skews male. And but we get seniors, we get all walks of life, because really, like, we don't have a niche necessarily. Like, some people think like, oh, I'm only going to accept traveling nurses, and I have to tell them like, okay, well, we're going to send you everybody. If you want to
Right.
accept only traveling nurses, that's up to you, you know. But for our marketing, we are casting as wide a net as possible, because there's so many people out there who are looking for affordable housing options.
Okay. Cool. So, are there any markets that are performing exceptionally well right now where people you would say, yeah, if you want to open a pad split there, you should go there?
Yeah, I mean, so, like, this changes all the time, because like what you'll see is with our numbers, like market wise, they're like, it's kind of like one of those graphics where people are just running from market to market. You know, it's so it kind of roller coasters sometimes. Like two that come top of mind right now: Philadelphia is super, you know, has a lot of occupancy. Richmond, Virginia, high occupancy. There's a lot of markets in Florida that have done really well. Now, investors that want the tried and true approach with like no, they don't want to be any type of pioneer. Atlanta presents a lot of
Okay.
opportunities, because we are like the Kleenex of co-living in Atlanta currently. Like,
Okay.
you know, like we'll go to have meetings in Atlanta every couple times a year, and we walk around in our PadSplit hats or whatever, and people are like, oh, hey, PadSplit, like
Yep.
they know who we are, right? You get in your Uber, and the Uber driver's like, oh, I live in this PadSplit, right? And you know, I'm actually getting hosts that have been investors in co-living in Atlanta for years. Everything was successful, and they're like, but now I'm getting people who, if I'm not on PadSplit, they'll say, oh, never mind, right? Like, I'm not interested.
Okay.
So, you know, that has its benefits in Atlanta. Southern California has an interesting dynamic to it. Like, you know, there's a lot of complications with doing it here, but there is also the appreciation play. So it really just depends on what the investor's goal is. Like, there's cash flow opportunities here, I would say, but it's more of a blended appreciation cash flow strategy.
Right. Yeah.
Versus like, but Dallas has been a great market for us. I would say like Richmond, Charlotte, Dallas, those are solid. Jacksonville has been pretty good for us.
Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you. So before we end, though, I want to ask you, like, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my link will be in the description of the video. It'll be my link tree
Okay.
where you can download my contact information. You can sign up for my webinars. I do 2 to 3 webinars a month on the second and third Fridays, usually, of every month, where I have guests on. Katrina, you're actually scheduled right in July. You're going to be coming on
Yes.
with me. So
Yes.
if you want to keep an eye out for that webinar specifically, you can go on my link tree. I post on my Eventbrite page. I also have a lot of helpful resources for co-living investors, like recommended furniture items,
Oh,
you know,
nice.
resources. Yeah, there's all sorts of helpful resources on there. I have a prop stream trial that you can sign up for if you want to try to identify properties that you want to buy for co-living. There's a whole lot of stuff on there. So that is where I usually recommend to connect with me. And then I'm also going to give a link for all the listeners here, where if you click on the second link that'll be there, that'll help you set up your host account so you can have access to those tools. And like I said, if you're watching this and you're at all interested in co-living, doing this type of investing, I would say sign up for a host account. You know, that way you can have access to those tools, because they are super helpful. And like I said, we don't charge
Yeah.
for them. So at least yet. So
Awesome.
definitely go sign up for it.
Right. Do it now.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, Devin.